Good evening and welcome to MPT's virtual discussion of A Time for Burning. My name is Kate Pearson and I'm the Managing Director of Programming and Acquisitions here at MPT, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's panel discussion. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce our three panelists, Bill Jersey, Dr. Kathryn Lofton, and Justin Ervin. Bill Jersey produced film and broadcast documentaries for over 40 years. In the early 60s, he established his reputation as one of the pioneers of the cinema verité movement. He was cinematographer, producer, and director for A Time for Burning, which was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary in 1967. Jersey's body of work includes 2 Academy Award nominees, A Time for Burning and Super Chief, on the life and legacy of Chief Justice Earl Warren. Other award-winning productions include The Rise and Fall of Jim Crow series, Peabody Award, Children of Violence, Emmy, Renaissance, Emmy nomination, Faces of the Enemy, Emmy nomination, Loyalty and Betrayal, Emmy, Hunting the Hidden Dimension, Pierre-Gilles Dejean Award, The Making of Amadeus, and Eames, The Architect and the Painter, Peabody Award. We're so honored to have you here.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Kathryn Lofton. Kathryn is Lex Hickson Professor of Religious Studies and American Studies, Professor of History and Divinity at Yale University, where she also serves as FAS Dean of Humanities. A scholar of religion in the United States, she is the author of 2 books, Oprah, The Gospel of an Icon, and Consuming Religion, and many articles, including a 2021 essay, Observational Secular, Religion and Documentary Film in the United States, that examined A Time for Burning. And we have Justin Ervin, who is an award-winning writer, director, and cinematographer of both scripted and non-scripted work. His work has appeared on Netflix, PBS, HBO, and Hulu, most recently serving as cinematographer on the 2022 Netflix original documentary, Is That Black Enough for You?, as well as the 2022 narrative feature film, Rittenhouse Square. Justin earned his MFA in social documentary filmmaking from SVA in New York City and has completed master courses at the prestigious American Society of Cinematographers. As a writer and director, he has won multiple awards, including Best Documentary at Garden State Film Festival and the Audience Award at New Filmmakers LA. Justin is currently developing a narrative adaptation of A Time for Burning. It's so exciting to have the 3 of you here, and let's get started. My first question is for you, Bill Jersey. Bill, you shot this documentary in the cinema verite form, and in so doing, you allow the events and the people of the film to unfold in an unscripted, organic way. The creation of this film was actually an assignment given to you by a Lutheran organization that it was in the hope of offering guidance to their congregations amidst so much cultural change and transitions in this time in America. So what was this organization's response to the film when it was released, and how was it received?
Well, before it got released, they were terrified because they thought I was going to do a film, and I intended to do a film demonstrating the capacity for a church to introduce change, but it didn't work out that way. And I don't, as I told them in the beginning, in fact, that was a big shock to them. They said, who's going to write the script? And I said, nobody. I said, well, maybe more accurately, the people who are going to be in front of the camera. And that's the way it worked. And I remember going to Bill Youngdahl and saying, Bill, are you sure that you want to look like this with your arms stretched out and on the cross? Because I think what you want to do as a liberal minister from Orange, New Jersey, you've gone to a very conservative all-white church. I don't think it's going to happen the way. Well, he said, I'm going to do the best I can, and I knew he was going to do the best he can. I also knew how it was going to end up. But you don't want to discourage people. I encouraged him. And he did, as if you saw the film, you saw that he did gather around himself some people who really supported him, believed in him. But his wife had the hardest time. She couldn't accept the fact that people just didn't like her, and she didn't do anything. except marry him. That was a mistake, I guess.
And how did the Lutheran commission who asked for the film like the film?
Well, as I said, they didn't like it at all. And, well, what happened was the commission got together with me and said, this is not the film we'd hoped. And I said, I realize that. But one guy got up and he said, look, this film is going to go on television with our name, or I'll die over, or I'll kill myself over, or something like some exaggerated explanation. But he felt very strongly that they should finish the film, and it was his conviction that the film was finished. But it was true. I understood what they felt. The hardest thing about that film really was not getting people to say things, but allowing people to say things that I thought were important for people to hear. Because I remember one meeting, the first meeting with Ernie Chambers. We had Ernie Chambers and a few other members of his group, and a white woman who I knew of, and young doll. And we get in the room, and they're all being nice to one another. And I said, this is fake. I'm putting my camera down, and I'm not going to waste film on you people being dishonest with one another. If anybody wants to be honest, I'll pick the camera back up. And of course, within 3 seconds, the camera grabs back up, and the people were being honest with one another. Not hostile, but honest, genuine. And I never felt Ernie was angry. I felt he was convicted. He had strong convictions about things, but he was such a. If you see the film in which he is really just driving this poor young white man from the church crazy, and he has a little smile on his face. And why am I flickering? Oh, because I've talked too much?
No.
Oh.
No. I don't know what that lighting was, but it's over now. So
it was Justin.
Not the big one. We're okay.
No, it was Justin. He says, "Come on, I'm on my turn." But what is that? That is really weird.
I'm not sure.
Anyhow,
well, thank you. I have another question for Kathryn Lofton. Dr. Lofton, in one of your papers on religion and documentary film that I was lucky enough to read, you wrote that making documentaries and viewing documentaries have long been components of a broad mission to raise awareness and encourage the tolerance of difference through the exposure of what is assumed to be or is being rendered to be unknown, mysterious, strange, and other. So could you talk to us a little about how A Time for Burning is a good example of what you label the religiosity of documentary film, which is to observe and to educate? And does this often happen in documentaries about religious communities? And how does it here?
Absolutely not. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote about A Time for Burning is it's so rare, because rather than a long tradition that starts with Nanook of the North and continues up through Jesus Camp, in which documentarians assume that the person they're looking at is very different from the viewer, this film assumes that its viewers all could imagine themselves saying some part that they're watching on camera. I bet as people watched tonight, they heard their own voice or their aunt's voice or their grandpa's voice in one of the people that were on screen. And the whole film is defined by debate and arguments. And it's so thrilling to behold differently religious people really disagreeing with each other actively, and that kind of relational practice of interpretation really defining religion in this film. And it's just such an excitement to watch a film that cares that deeply about religious difference, and then finally resolves that the kinds of civility they practice is what perpetuates racist systems. If they followed their religions, they wouldn't be different with one another. Their fight for civility, which in the film is really encoded with whiteness, is where it all falls apart.
Thank you. And do either of you, or Justin included, have a good answer, hopefully Bill, as to why the title is in fact A Time for Burning?
Oh, I know exactly why it is. Because I felt that something positive was happening, but it wasn't the kind of happy positive. It wasn't the easy to access positive. It was the difficult positive, which requires a burning, which requires a cutting. It could have been called a cutting film too, but I just thought it was a time for burning. And to me, that was a positive statement. That was not a negative statement.
And Justin, you're creating the narrative feature of this film. You are actually adapting the film. I would love to know, and I'm sure everybody else would love to know, how this film came into your life, how it impacted you, and what are your plans? What are you going to make of this film, and why? Why is it so important to make this film right now?
Sure. I was first introduced to A Time for Burning at my graduate cinematography class at SVA in New York City by one of my professors, Tom Hurwitz, who actually is a friend of Bill Jersey's. And it stuck with me ever since. It's something that I thought was an evergreen, something that could be watched at any time, because you would imagine that the film wasn't made in a small period of time like 67 and not have that same relevance today, which it certainly does. So in 2020, when everything was happening during the summer after George Floyd was murdered, I thought, okay, there has to be a way to articulately try and convey some of these feelings, because you find yourself in a position where, you hear the church wanting to do something, or rather being silent when you hear other secular white folks wanting to do something, but not knowing what to do about it. And I feel like the film is a good avatar for what you were saying earlier, Kathryn, about how this might be something my grandmother was saying, or my cousin was saying, or that I've said. And so just giving the room for the conversation to continue in that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
No, it's okay. Also, because although Bill's film is lauded for the reason it is, it's a perfect documentary, but in a contemporary audience, I don't know many people that are familiar with the traditional cinema verite style would have necessarily the patience to sit through, or the familiarity to sit through a black and white pure 60s verite film. So because the story is still easily transferable to today, just modernizing it in a way that keeps the spirit of it, keeps the pathos, and keeps the thesis of it for a modern audience.
I think that's lovely. Did you hear what he said? Easily transferable? Oh, Justin, lots of luck, bubble up. I think that's an amazing, it's a big task he's setting out for himself, and that's why I'm supportive of it, because I do think it needs to be made more relevant. The color, the dress, everything, it needs to be made, and it's the same bloody, and bloody is a good appropriate word, story today. So I wish you all the luck.
And how about in a Lutheran church today? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Kate.
No, go ahead, Kathryn, please.
I was just going to say, to me, the relevance is just the arguing, which, now happens so much online, but there's such a vivid sense from word go that that's what we're watching. And we all know, we've seen comment threads that are as vivid on these topics as these speakers. And what's to me so exciting about an adaptation is bringing that loudness of debate, which we know people are doing in their homes, in their hallways, in their congregations right now on these exact same themes. And one of the questions asked how many Lutheran groups there are in the United States, and there's still over 40 different Lutheran denominations. The evangelical remains the largest group, but in the 19th century, that would be how you'd fight. You'd fight through different religious organizations. Now we fight differently, and we fight online, and we fight in different forms of sectarian groups. I think what's exciting is to imagine how we can start to think with each other in this form of argument, and watching that live on stage just seems more important than ever before.
Do you think, Kathryn, do you think the churches, there are people in the churches who want to have this kind of confrontation with one another?
They've already had it. I mean, the civil rights movement that you depict really was a key moment of splintering in churches and over questions of racial lines. And that continues to happen in conservative denominations across the United States. So I think it's happening right now in dividing families as much as churches.
Wow.
And a general question for everyone on the panel. Why is it that integration seems to be an endpoint for so many people when speaking about racial reconciliation?
That's a wonderful question. And I think that it's because ostensibly on the face of religion, and specifically the Christian faith, if you imagine yourself to be a part of a unified family in Christ, and you're not behaving towards your brother and your sister in that way, then people are still wondering where the true integration is of that family, of that spiritual family. So to see that fractured, or to see that somehow not living up to the standard of what the message of Christ, the message of the cross, the message of the church is supposed to be, then it's very confusing. It's like the quote from the woman in the film where she said, "Pastor, I want them. I want God to bless them as much as he blesses me, but I just don't want to be anywhere near them. And that's sort of the mantra that the white evangelical church has taken, a very hands-off, turn a blind eye approach to it. And it's a complete fracture. And I think responsible, honestly, for a lot of what we are dealing with in society today, the lack of unification within the church.
Well, when I grew up,
on racial topics specifically.
Yeah, when I grew up, we used to sing, Jesus loves the little children, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. And it never occurred to us that there's no red, yellow, or black within sight anywhere. But we sang that cheerily along.
Especially not in what Jesus had spoken about,
Jesus threw people like that out of the church.
No, I think he's.
Go ahead. No, I think
No,
the
I think
idea
what
that
you're saying
Jesus
is you would say
embraced everybody
about,
and everybody was okay. That's not true. Jesus threw some of them out of the church, and he didn't understand it. And he didn't go to the cross to have arrested. He got to the cross because he opposed people, because he wouldn't stand for the hypocrisy of people, because he wouldn't pretend to be something he wasn't. Gee, that's a trick.
Bill, did you find that the young people in the film, you have some wonderful young African-American teenagers talking in church and arguing amongst themselves. Yeah. And it starts out with one of them saying that he was shocked to hear white against white, Italian against Irish, which was like blew his mind. But were there any white teenagers that you also had talked to from the church, and did you interview them and not include them? Or
you didn't see the film?
No, I did, but
Well, remember when I took the white teenagers from their comfort of their all white church to an African American church, and they got in the car, they said, don't leave me. I don't want to be alone with those people. Huh?
But they didn't have these deep discussions the way the African-American kids did.
No. The white church in general repeats their litany of so-called faith. You saw that when the church members all got together. And it wasn't that they were angry at me. They were just they were nonplussed. They like, what do we do with this? They were just lost as to what to do when somebody starts talking about black people. As the one guy said, no, he made a point. He made a point. We had a Negro in my class, I think, or something like that. We had a black child in our class.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Ernie Chambers, the barbershop scene. In the barbershop scene, we see a very earnest Bill Youngdahl, very patient, very earnest. His optimism is pretty much eviscerated pretty methodically by Ernie Chambers' stark dismissal. And we see Bill sweat. Can you tell us a little bit about that sweat and Ernie's prediction that Bill will be forced out of the church, which turned out to be true? Why is this scene so important? Why is this scene pivotal?
It's one of the fake scenes. You know what I mean by a fake scene? It means that the editing room made that scene. I cut out, Ernie Chambers had all of his great remarks. He had what he did. But Bill Youngdahl had he was a very bright guy, and he had a biblical scholar, and he would make biblical references, and he would make answers to Ernie. He was very generous, he was very open, but he asserted himself. I cut everything out of Bill, and I called Bill, and I said, Bill, you got to look at that sequence. You will not recognize it because you are a silent victim in a situation which you're not that at all. But I said, to me, that was the essence of what was happening. You really didn't have any answers. Yeah, and you tried to, and you did well by other people's assessment if they looked at it. But I said, so I didn't want you to have a voice. I wanted to silence you. But so I wanted you to see it, because if you were offended by that, I won't do them. And I meant that. I wouldn't have put them in the film if he didn't. He said, look, You got the essence of what was really happening. How can I complain?
What do you think about that, Kathryn?
One of the things that's so striking about that scene is how, Ernie, every point Bill tries to make or any utterance, it's just decimated. And it's decimated by a person who is so confident that the church is not going to do right. And one of the things that this film displays so well is precisely why integration is in part a Christian concept. And it doesn't really work in practice because the church is not an advocate for integration. It's an advocate for its own domination, for missionizing to people who will convert to it. In the history of the church, that has often been non-white people who have been subject to white missionary effort. And Ernie is a person who is a student of the bad history of religion, and he is just going after Youngdahl. That's a classic posture of the atheist critic and the Christian believer. And the Christian believer thinks, well, there's something in this tradition that can work. And Chambers is like, that might be true, but you're not going to win. Both of them are right. And there are viewers who agree with Youngdahl and hope that the Christian tradition can save us. But there's many viewers who agree with Ernie and think that the only thing that will save us is tough questions and studying our history.
And what about in today's churches? Are there the socially conscious ministers today that we see in Bill Youngdahl in Omaha?
There absolutely are, but I have to say they are hard to find because the largest still church-going congregations remain among the more conservative theological organizations in this country. Church life has really diminished overall. Sociologically, the number of people who attend churches is going down rapidly across time. And those who remain committed churchgoers at this point are largely committed to a conservative agenda that can sometimes have racial reconciliation in it, but most churches on Sunday morning in America are very racially segregated.
And there's a question from a viewer. Bill, was Pastor Bill Youngdahl able to make a difference elsewhere? What happened to him after this experience?
Yeah, he went to a more comfortable environment in Palo Alto, and then up north. So he went to churches that welcomed him and liked what he had to say. But he never had a big church again like that. But I think he was happy.
And Justin, what about the big question that's asked in the very beginning of the film by Bill Youngdahl, where he just says flat out to his congregation, what kind of attitude are you sharing with your friends, your family, your children? What is your race relations vocabulary? Do you feel like this question is being asked today, either by religious leaders or filmmakers? And do you think that a narrative film, the documentary film obviously asks it, but are you hoping that your film will ask that question and provoke that discussion?
It'll absolutely provoke the discussion. I think to address Bill Youngdahl's point, I think the race relations vocabulary is very much in its infancy. I think that amongst the parishioners, the question is there in a much more relevant and earnest way. They don't hear it being discussed among the pulpit, yet they'll watch a news report that reflects something happening of an injustice that then isn't discussed by and large, I would assume, in a general sense, from their leadership. So and what I've experienced personally in various areas, I've actually had screenings of this film in Lincoln twice, actually. I've had conversations in other places about the film, and invariably the conversation about the film is longer than the film itself by twice as much, more often than not. And furthermore, it gives people the chance to sort of take off the training wheels of this race relations vocabulary, because they're babbling because they don't have the length of time or the hours in or the days or the years in to have spoken about it intelligently. And then you find yourself in a position where the film now puts everybody in the same level playing field to start having these conversations. And more often than not, I would say, sadly, these conversations aren't being had or addressed in any direct way by church leadership. And so the conversation, to answer your question, is there. It just has Bambi legs right now. So as soon as it learns how to walk properly, and then I think that it will really start to affect change in some way.
And will your film also be called A Time for Burning? Uh-oh. I made him freeze.
Well,
Justin.
you know, he will title it, I'm sure, as I did, in a way that's appropriate to what he thinks he wants an audience to understand. And I wanted the audience to understand that this was a very tense, difficult time. A time for burning doesn't mean they're bad guys and good guys. It means that everybody is struggling. Everybody is being hurt. Everybody is being terrified. And so it's not a critical title, and I'm sure that Justin will come up with a. He apparently is. Oh no, he is back. There he is. I thought maybe he left us because we're talking too much. I'll shut up. Go ahead, Justin. You talk.
A question that was asked by several people is: do you know, Bill or Kathryn or Justin, how the two churches are doing now in 2023? Have they reconciled their racial differences?
I don't think the black church had any conversation with the white church. And, you know, that the church is I'm sorry, but the church is a disaster to me. I don't think they ever really embraced the issue in a way that would liberate them from their fear. I mean, I still think they're. Kathryn, you talked to them. What did you think?
Yeah, well, the Young Girls Church is now more inclusive and tries to promote and speaks about, when I spoke to its membership, an effort to be more inclusive. It doesn't have an extremely racially diverse population, but it has a more racially diverse population than it did when the film was made. But it does not have a relationship with the Black church, so that never became reconciled.
No.
Do you think in general churches tend to continue to be one of the sort of the last bastions of segregation in the United States?
No, I think the American education and medical systems are the most segregated parts of the United States, but I think churches reflect that reality. And I think there are some churches in the United States. The Roman Catholic Church is a large church in the United States. The Southern Baptist Convention are a very large organization. Both of those have interracial congregations. They also have very racially segregated congregations. But when we talk about segregation in this country, we should look at the social systems that Ernie Chambers really encourages us to think about, which is housing, medical care, and education. Those are the places where this country continues to organize itself very passionately in a segregated way. Churches are just an ongoing reflection of that material reality.
That's true. Justin, I'm sorry that you had technical difficulties in the middle of our question before, and I wanted to bring you back and give you the opportunity to finish up your thoughts.
The last thing but
well, I think that you might still be having some technical difficulties at this time. Okay. In the meantime, we wanted to open it up to other questions for the audience, if there were audience Q&A. And I was just sort of looking over here on the side because we have a person who is fielding questions from the audience. One of them is Bill, Jersey. What would be a current topic or person you'd like to cover today with this intimacy and gravitas?
Nobody. You know, the problem today is that we're too sophisticated. You know, it's really hard to break through. The Lutheran Church in 1965, that church was pretty unsophisticated. If I wanted to, I could have gotten away with a lot of things I didn't want to. But today, people are very good at masking. People are very good at hiding. People are very good at being disingenuous to one another. I mean, I was happy to see it look like that maybe the Republicans and the Democrats were really going to try and make an effort to talk to one another. Forget about making a difference in one another's lives. There's no authentic conversation going on. That's the tragedy.
So if you had the chance to make a cinema verité documentary, do you think that your answer means you would hover about somewhere in the hallways of Congress?
No, actually, no. Where I would go to high schools. I'd go to a black high school. I'd go to a white high school. Because that's the people who really, even though they want to sound like they know what they're talking about, are not really certain about what they're talking about. They're fearful, they're confused, they're angry, and they have a right to be angry. This is a crazy freaking world. And people are not being honest with one another. People are not caring for one another. I don't mind you could disagree with me. If in your disagreement, you're hoping to make me a better person, that's fine. But if you're hoping just to diminish me or cast me aside, that's not fine. And there's too much. There's too much destructing of the other. It doesn't even have to be an enemy, just the other. I mean, it's the Donald Trump world. That's a little harsh, but there is an awful lot of Donald Trump influence.
And how about, was his last name Christians? Ray, the gentleman who said, imagine where was the church during the rise of the Nazis? We don't want history to look back at us and say, where was the church during this time of racial crisis and upheaval? And then somebody asked him, well, what about you, Ray? And he said, I'm scared to death.
Well, he's my favorite person because he was one of the people who really was changed by his experience. When we started out, I mean, the idea of talking about N people, black people, he told me, couldn't we talk about something else? Couldn't we talk about old people or sick people? Or he didn't want to talk about black people. He was just, in the end, he said, I said, right, you've really changed. He said, no, he said, I've really become open. I haven't changed yet, but I think I'm going to change because you have to change and the world has to change. I said, I wish you to say that on camera.
And what do the rest of you think about that scene between him and his wife, which I can't believe that, Bill, you managed to capture, that was so awkward between them.
Well, as Justin will know if he tries to deal with people like that, what we did was we brought our cameras with us. Barbara and I, she brought the sound man, and I brought my camera, she brought her sound, and we just put them by the side. We put them by our front knee, though, as a matter of fact. We didn't put them that far away because we did not want this to be a film sequence. We had no intention of having it. But if something really important happened, as you saw it did, we felt not only free, we felt obliged. We felt the audience needed to see how hard it was for some white people who really did want to make a connection, make a communication. It was hard with her. She just couldn't do it. And I thought that, in a way, that's the most important sequence in the film. Is how difficult it is for some people who really she wanted to be open, but she just, and I think that's what she said, I can't do it. I think that was her phrase. I can't do it. I just can't do it.
And I think that's one of the things that that a lot of white people sort of default to when it gets difficult, the option of tapping out, the option of being able to say, you know what, just like the one gentleman was saying to Ray, it's not a good time, it's not a good time.
That's right.
And so, we all know about waiting for the right thing to happen, waiting for change to happen. It's not how it works. And I think that your film really underscores that in a powerful way, that when change happens, sometimes it's catastrophic for those who are made uncomfortable by that change. And certainly the narrative film will reflect that. But that's one of the things I really took away from the documentary is the upheaval. It's like what Ray was saying to his wife about, this is the peace that Christ talked about. This is a superficial piece. We have the air conditioning, we have the stained glass windows, we have these nice cushy seats, but it's not real peace. It's a removal of responsibility.
I just think when I finished the film, I thought I said to Barbara, boy, wouldn't it be great if Jesus came back to the earth and saw this shit and started talking to you? No, you're not my person if that's the way you're going to behave. No, you're not my believer if that's what you're going to do. But he never came, so I was bummed. Actually, I was pissed.
I think if we were reading in the Christian tradition, we would say that Jesus is supposed to be among us. That's why he was incarnated. And I think what's really exciting, I agree that we're living in a time where debate is hard, but that's partially because we've made more democratic possibility for debate than we have before. Social media opened the door to a lot of amazing activists. There are Ernie Chambers and Bill Youngdalls on TikTok, Imani Barbaran, an amazing Black queer activist who's thinking a lot about disability and access. You can find voices that are speaking in the way that Ernie and Bill do. They're not in the same form, and they're largely not in the frame of the Christian church anymore. They might be Christian identified, but they're not church identified. So I think we have to still try to listen to where the voices of criticism and hope sit. And I think they still are out there, just not in the same frame.
That's a great point. And somebody did write in and say, how can the churches have this honest conversation when all you see on social media and television is racial division? Everybody goes to their respective corner and is not open to hearing the other person's point of view. But
I think
Kathryn,
it's because they're afraid of judgment. They're afraid of putting their first step forward, irrespective of the nervousness or irrespective of like the quivers that they might feel. To take that first step toward conversation, I think is the relevant issue.
Also, I am really angry at the media, but I understand it. The media wants to show you only bad stuff because good news doesn't sell newspapers. That's what they say.
speaking of good news, I would say that the new film that Justin is going to be creating is wonderful news. Because a lot of people have no idea that it's coming. And I think that your film, Justin, will definitely cause a ripple effect back to A Time for Burning, the original film. Maybe there'll even be a double DVD set. I don't know. Do people even watch DVDs anymore?
Hopefully somebody from Criterion Collections out there watching, because I think that would be an amazing dual release.
Well, me too. I want one too. But it sounds so exciting. And can you just let us know quickly a timeline? Are you in pre-production now or development?
In development.
Okay. So it'll be in the next 5 years, hopefully fewer.
You know what? I think we all want to see it happen sooner than that. So we'll just believe for
Okay.
sooner than 5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the
That's
things
just
that's really
big enough.
encouraging about that is how much traction the barbershop scene. I'm not sure if you're aware, Bill, but that barbershop scene plays on social media as a standalone piece and is pretty much ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So I think the appetite is certainly out there, and I think the time is appropriate.
It is.
It is, and boy, I wish you luck because you are setting off on a very tough climb.
Yes.
Well, you forged the first path, Bill Jersey.
Yes, you did.
You and your
mine
camera.
was easy.
Well, I'd like to I think we're wrapping up now because it's already almost 8:40 and you've all been so generous with your time. I wanted to give you all just another minute. If there's anything else that you wanted to say or ask each other while we're here or put out there.
I think the professors should sum it all up because that's what professors do.
Yes.
They take a massive body of knowledge and they reduce it to a palatable or an acceptable or tolerable point. So, Kathryn, please sum it all up.
I would just tell everyone to go on YouTube and find that clip that Justin referred to. You can put barbershop, it'll usually come up barbershop and Time for Burning, and share it with friends, share it with family. It's a discussion that produces conversation. And the more we circulate what this film sought to achieve, the more we can maybe make a better stage for the conversations that I'm sad to say we are nowhere near done having. So try to share with at least 5 friends that incredible clip.
Thank you. Well said. And thank you all for participating. Bill, Kathryn, Justin, and thank you all who are watching for dialing in, watching the film, supporting the film, and being part of our panel. We really appreciate it. And I just wanted to end this by saying you can watch this or share with your friends. This whole entire experience has been shot, so it will be shared on YouTube in the next couple of weeks. And you'll all be getting emails about that from our Director of Engagement, Kristen Penchek at Maryland Public Television. And we hope that you've found tonight as inspiring as I have. And stay tuned for another Conversation for Change, which will be coming down the pike in the next month or two from MPT. Again, thank you all for being here. And I just feel honored that I got to sit amongst you all. So thank you very much. And
the honor's ours. The honor's mine.
Thank you.